You're listening to The Voice of Russia in London with me, Juliet Spare. Not even pocket money these days can escape the digital revolution. Children as young as 8 are now able to shop online with their very own Visa debit card called Pocket Money, spelt PKTMNY. No vowels, text speak. It's believed to be the first prepaid debit card developed for 8 to 16-year-olds, where parents can preload the card with money for their children, who can then use it in a few shops and banks to withdraw cash. The developers say it's a tool to help teach children about money. On the other hand, is it a cynical attempt by big corporate brands to directly market their products to children? Joining me in the studio to discuss whether youngsters in the UK should have access to plastic money at 8 years old is Chief Executive of the Pocket Money Bank, Mark Timbrell, Becky Goddard-Hill, who's a writer and mother of 2 children, Professor Agnes Nairn, a researcher and writer and consultant on ethics and children, and co-author of UNICEF's report on children's well-being, and Stephen Hopwood, a father and a lawyer of the Children's Department at Stowe Family Law firm. Do children as young as 8 years old really need to learn the value of money in this way? I'm going to first of all come to Mark Timbrell to first of all tell us a bit about this bank Pocket Money.
I'd just like to say that Pocket Money isn't a bank. It's an environment which has been created specifically by parents for other parents to provide an environment for their children to learn safely and wisely about saving and spending money. I am also a parent, like one of more of the guests today, and this has been built not just by me as a parent, by 3 other parents who joined me. The process started 3 years ago, and it's about learning about safe saving and safe spending.
Mark, why did you set up with the other parents then this pocket money environment for children to access their cash?
Approximately 4 years ago, I think my eldest child was, I know how old she was 16. My middle child, Megan, was 10, and my youngest child, Jacob, was 7. When I looked around at the environment that they could learn about money or save their money in an interesting and engaging way, or in fact how they could spend their money safely, there seemed to me a paucity of opportunity. The products available from banks or building societies, or even for that matter, that which was available in the classroom, seemed to be unable to fill the gap that I perceived in enabling my children to learn the value of money, how to save it, and most importantly, spend it safely.
Can you just then explain what it is? For someone who has no idea about pocket money, and even the fact that it's spelt PKTMNY, just the basics.
Okay. It's quite hard to describe a visual product on radio, as you know, but if I can just sort of isolate the component parts. Our first objective, and a really very, very single-minded objective, was to create a graphic saving system which children could relate to much more easily than they could with lines of type and traditional savings mechanisms. Yes, it's an online environment, but I think we as parents recognise also that the online and digital world is incredibly important from children from a very young age these days. The second component is many of the parents like us we spoke to have tried various mechanisms to teach children that money can be earned, not just given. And lots of various mechanisms have been employed, and as parents we're probably familiar with some of them. Counting up marbles, looking at setting up Excel spreadsheets, providing stars or tokens, and so on and so forth. The centrepiece of our pocket money environment is an easy-to-use, task-based system where parents can assign tasks in conjunction with their children and set values against them should they wish to, or, for that matter, simply pay pocket money on a regular basis as they so choose. The third part is, of course, the pocket money card. Now, this isn't a debit card, and it most certainly isn't a credit card. It is a card which is fully controllable by parents to ensure that any child, and obviously the card is given to a child at the parent's discretion, is to ensure that any child who has the card is operating within a framework set by the parents. So to characterise that, For example, with my youngest child, Jacob, who's 11, I can set a limit at any time for a single transaction amount. So if he wants to go and buy something online, I can set a transaction limit at 10, or I can even set, for example, a total weekly expenditure. So those are the main component parts of what we do. But most important, it's all about pictures, pie charts, graphics. It's very unlike anything which is available today from anywhere else.
So it does sound, where it's not a bank, it does sound that it's the bank of mum and dad, almost controlled by parents for their children, with tasks set against money given to children. But putting money on plastic for children and sort of allowing them to use it online in this digital fashion, are we losing a sense of pocket money, or are we sort of giving children too much of an opportunity to become brand aware? What would you think, Becky? You're a mother of two and a blogger.
I think children are brand aware, and I think they're too brand aware, to be honest. And I think whilst this scheme sounds excellent, and it is the way we use money, so we're giving children a sense of what actually happens later on, rather than you use pennies and 5 pennies now and later on we'll give you some plastic and you'll go crazy with it. I think whilst that's a good scheme, I think there's too much focus on money in children's lives, and I think a return to children being children is really important. And whilst they do have savings, and whilst they do spend the pocket money, and my children do, they get the Beano each week and a few sweets, but then they stop thinking about it. And the money they're given for savings is put in a bank by me, and they don't actually think about it again. And maybe later on in the year, at some point, they might say, "Oh, I want this big thing." I'll say, "Well, maybe we'll take some out of your savings," but generally it's not on their mind all the time. That would be my main concern with this, that it would become something they're a bit fixated by, wanting to earn a bit more or save a bit more, or can I go online and spend this? And actually I think we need to move away a bit from consumerism, because I think it's a bit all-consuming for our kids and they need to return to play. That's just a personal view. However, as a blogger about money, I'm fully aware there's many, many adults and parents out there who struggle desperately with not having much education around money. And I do think it's really important children do get that education. And this does seem a good scheme. I'm in two minds, really.
What mind are you in at the moment, Professor Nairn? You're a researcher and writer and consultant on the ethics on children. You could talk a bit perhaps about your report on children's wellbeing and the kind of brand awareness there. Would this make matters worse?
The report you're referring to is what we did where we looked at children in Spain, Sweden and the UK, and we were looking at what makes children unhappy, because a UNICEF report a few years before had put UK children at the bottom of the heap, and we thought it was perhaps something to do with materialism and also inequality. Income inequality. And we did find that children in the UK were under a huge amount of commercial pressure, as you've just been, exactly as you've been saying. And more than that, parents are also under a lot of commercial pressure to buy things, which wasn't the case in Sweden. I mean, Sweden banned advertising to children quite a long time ago. And in Spain, there's only been commercial television since the 80s, so parents aren't quite as fixated maybe on commercial things. I'm in two minds about the card as well. I think children do need to learn to manage their money. I think it's incredibly important, and I think any kind of vehicle that allows them to see that money doesn't grow on trees and that it runs out and so forth is crucial. I'm just a bit concerned that you have to pay for this. Shouldn't this be something that banks offer? I mean, it's like 50p to withdraw money from the bank. It costs parents £1 to put this into action. I mean, I'm kind of I find that a little bit strange. Why didn't you lobby the banks to offer the pie charts and so on? So that's one of, you're going to answer in a minute. That's one of my reservations. Also, I mean, I do wonder, do you actually need software and cards to do this? Can't you kind of do a star chart and give your kids the actual physical money?
Well, I think before you respond, I must bring in now Stephen Hopwood, who's head of Children's Department at Stowe Family Law. And perhaps, Stephen, you want to answer as a father first, then lawyer?
Yes. Well, actually, I think I'll do it the other way around, because as a lawyer, we're told in this country that as far as the Children Act is concerned, children are children until they're 18, which, as a father, doesn't seem to be particularly true, I have to say. My eldest daughter is 12 going on I'm not sure what she's going on, but certainly going on 13 in terms of her years. They're very, very brand aware. And I do think this credit card will be something that, well, it's not a credit card, I'm sorry, you've explained that much better than I could. I think it's something that could help her, yeah. I think this is a good way of showing her that this is how much money you have got, and she can actually physically see it, whereas if she's got it sort of in reality, she tends to lose it. I think another important thing is concentrating on how does the money get into the account in the first place, because my daughter, we've encouraged her to do certain jobs which we pay her for so she can go out with her friends, and that's what we really focus on, how the money gets to her, or rather why the money gets to her.
Well, this brings us nicely back, actually, because I know Agnes Nairn was about to ask, really, why you didn't lobby the banks and what's wrong with a good old-fashioned star chart with some pocket money at the end of the day. Why then do you charge parents for using the service?
Two important things. And also, could I just pop back to a point Agnes made before about Scandinavia? It's interesting to see that I think something like 97% of all transactions in Scandinavia are card-based. And I think it's fair to say our next port of call by invitation from a well-known Scandinavian person is to look at pocket money being available in the Nordic countries. In answer to Stephen's point, and Agnes's point rather, about costs, we are simply parents. We created this because we'd experimented with star charts, we've experimented with Excel spreadsheets. But to Stephen's point, it was really, really important, as we know, as children get to a certain age, probably going to secondary school, that it's really important for them to learn the value of money. And the only way they're going to do that is by learning that money is earned. And when they've earned it and they've saved it, it disappears if they spend it. And that's exactly what our system shows in real time. Now, why didn't the banks sponsor this? I think it would be a very unusual position for the banks to sponsor anything somewhat controversially other than perhaps sporting events or other activities which are very good for their brand profile or very good for entertaining their customer base. So
that's not quite what I meant, but
for the only costs we have, for example, the ATM cost, which we're working hard to reduce, is a banking cost we have to pay. It's a lot lower than any other equivalent system. It is the absolute rock bottom cost that we can charge. It's not our cost. We don't make money from it. It is a cost the banks impose on us to use their networks. The banks, I think it's a very good point. A number of the banks, I think, have seen what we've been doing over the last year or so and have probably asked themselves the same question, why aren't we doing this? I think perhaps because corporately it's not in their interests to do something which doesn't create products they can sell or debt that they can sell and make money out of. We're purely about creating a responsible, safe environment, totally controlled by parents to teach saving and safe spending, with the tasks bit in the middle. The small monthly charge, we have to cover the costs of our administration, but we're totally committed to keeping our costs as low as possible.
So is it a cooperative, or is it a limited company? Or
it's a limited company, yeah. But our charges are, as we constantly, I mean, the £1 a month we think is a relatively small charge for the tools which are available to be used by parents for their kids.
I mean, there might be one reason why banks didn't do it in the first place is that, do you think it would be very popular with parents for banks to sort of have an arm of their brand sort of totally marketed towards children at such a young age? Do you think you're allowed to sort of do this because you're coming from a parent perspective, which makes it more appealing?
I think probably the best answer to that is that banks do market to children, and they tend to, I think their definition of children, as I'm sure as Stephen knows very well, is at 13. Banks are very keen, it seems to me, I could be wrong, seem to be very keen to put debit cards into the hands of untutored children to spend money, which is invisible, not transparent, and certainly not safe. It's going on all the time. So 62% of all children over the age of 13 up to the age of 16, I think, have debit cards, totally uncontrollable. Our card is totally controllable at all times.
I was going to say, when you say it's not controllable, you can't go overdrawn or anything on a debit card, can you, on a kid's debit card?
You can't, but equally, if, for example, my daughter Megan is sitting outside, if she had a debit card, and I wouldn't let her have a debit card, if she had £150 in her account, she could go shopping online anywhere or offline anywhere and spend just as much as she wanted to. It could all go in one go.
She'd do it once.
She could just, and we've had those tiers. I mean, this is a large part of parental experience is trying to stop the problem before it becomes a reality. So let's have the tiers about controlled spending and a framework rather than afterwards when it's all gone.
You're listening to The Voice of Russia in London, where we're talking about the digitalisation of pocket money. Joining me is Chief Executive of the Pocket Money Organisation, Mark Timbrell, Becky Goddard-Hill, a financial blogger and mother of two, Professor Agnes Nairn, a researcher and consultant on ethics and children, and Stephen Hopwood, father and lawyer at Stowe Family Law firm.
My only concern would be that my son, for example, he's very good at maths himself, but still finds money quite tricky. You know, it's tricky. It looks the same, whatever. And he needs to understand money and he needs to work it out. And so just getting his £2 a week and figuring out what his sweeties cost and what his little cards cost and going to spend it is very, very important.
Absolutely.
And actually, I don't really think much before 7 are you able to start to do that. So I think there needs to be a bit of time where it is tangible and it is physical and they are actually using it too. So that would need to be encouraged alongside.
Of course, and I totally agree with that. And in fact, if you look at our graphic savings system, it's very much put in a sort of graphic coin collection type framework. But, you know, one size doesn't fit all.
No.
You know, this is not prescriptive. All we're trying to do as parents is to create a safe environment for parents to do what they need to do with their children to teach them about money. That's all we're really doing.
I'm just interested, though, obviously you have people registering and families registering and children registering for the cards. With that data that then you collect, is there a sort of terms and conditions that they agree to allow you to collect that data? And then I would be concerned as a parent, I'm not, but perhaps, that then companies would be able to track the trends of children purchasing things. I can be completely wrong.
No, I think hopefully Stephen could reinforce me on this one if he's looked at the website or if he does in the future. Everything we're doing is fully compliant, has been investigated very thoroughly. In terms of the data we hold, it is totally anonymised data. It is not available to anybody to market to, and it won't be used for us to advise anybody how to market to us. And most importantly, there's no data held on the children specifically. The account actually belongs to the parent. The parent sets up the account. They're fully validated through KYC secure processes. And then it is, in fact, the parent opening the account for the child underneath the parental control. So there is no direct relationship with the child.
Yes, and I have looked at things, obviously, before I came on air. And, I had no concerns like that. I think it's something that I will be happy for my daughter to look at. So I suppose that answers the question, really.
I think, without wanting to put you on almost on trial with three of us sitting around the table, I think it almost reflects how fascinating that it is completely new and that no one has done it. And it's almost sort of taking back the power from other organisations and banks and putting it in, well, if the banks aren't going to do it in the right way that's palatable, that's why we're going to do it.
Exactly.
But I suppose there is the wider issue of the brand awareness, and maybe then perhaps not from a child's perspective, but from a parent's perspective. Then the pressure then they're under as to how much money. I mean,
exactly.
Whenever you grow up, people always used to say, how much pocket money do you get? What allowance do you get? And there's always those who get more than others. I suppose this means it's a lot more defined.
So interesting you said that. A parent said to my son a couple of weeks ago, we were playing tennis, she said, how much pocket money do you get, Frankie? And he said, I get £1. She said, £1? Your mum's a bit tight, isn't she? I was so embarrassed. She gives her children £5 each. There were 7 and 5. And I said, really? Anyway, he badgered me all the way home. I agreed to put it up to £2 at my limit. But it was actually, he said, but I feel really stupid that younger child gets more than me. And it got a bit competitive, and I don't want him to think like that. I want him to be playing, and I want him to be creating adventures, and I want him to not want to wear designer and trendy clothes or have the latest toy. I want him to be building dens in the garden and to be a child. It whizzes away, and that woman should never have asked him that. And actually, money is an uncomfortable subject we all need to talk about more easily, so we don't get into problems and it doesn't get hidden But I think there's a time for that, and I think secondary school is a good time to really get into that. I think whilst they're still at primary school and they're still learning, I wouldn't give it to my child, but I do think it sounds a good, interesting project, perhaps for the right child and maybe for a different family to us. But I'm trying to rein back the consumerism because my kids do get a bit obsessed, really.
Do you think then, Agnes, there's other parents want to kind of claw back that consumerism?
Massively. I mean, every survey that's done, I mean, the Chartered Institute of Marketing did a survey not very long ago, and 90% of parents think that, more needs to be done to stop commercialisation of childhood. 90% of parents last week said they thought Christmas was just a big commercial bonanza. Yes, parents are incredibly bothered, annoyed, irritated by the commercialisation of their children's childhood. And I mean, I agree that if you make pocket money this sort of big, exciting online going everywhere thing, that's it maybe makes pocket money and money more important than it needs to be. By the same token, there's been a trend towards kids not having pocket money. More and more kids just get ad hoc handouts, and I mean that's partly related to a higher divorce rate, where you've got two parents living in different households, and it's much more difficult to create a kind of a stable pocket money environment. And I think anything that makes parents and children stop and think about regular income and where money comes from and how to spend it, I think's a good thing. And I mean, I'd hate to think you were, making ruthless profits out of this, because I think that would be terribly wrong. But I think the idea's got. It's got a lot of merit. It's something that's worth debating and discussing.
And I certainly think it's worth, to a certain extent, is this just not pocket money catching up with the digital revolution to some extent? Yes. We could all harp back onto the pocket money we loved, and with the star charts, and you'd get that for tidying in the room, or cajole your mum into giving you more each month or whatever. And it's always everyone trying to kind of preserve something that's not yet digitalised. And this, to a certain extent, seems that this is, well, you've done it, and so this is what's happened, and everyone else will catch up.
Well, I hope so. And we're all talking as parents. I am one too. And I've created this in a way that I want to be proud of it. I want my children to be happy and proud using it and be able to tell their friends. But most importantly, I'm accountable to everybody else in the schools that my children go to. Absolutely. So please don't think that I'm on trial here today. I have been on for the last 3 years with many parents continuously, so I'm used to it. But what we've tried to create is, going back to Stephen's point, my family particularly, the founders' families and other parents, really want their children to be able to see, to Stephen's point and Agnes's point, that if a child spends some money, it's no longer there. Absolutely. Money doesn't literally grow on trees. And the handout thing has become incredibly prevalent over the last 10 years. Children see things, and I'm hugely anti-child consumerism and direct marketing to children. I think it's completely wrong. And if you were to step outside and ask my daughter, she'd confirm the point, because my children now are able to say, Dad, you really don't need to buy that. Look how much it costs. And that's what they've learned in the last 3 years. They've understood relative value, and that money has to be earned, and the best way to learn about it is to learn by doing in real time. So whilst the star charts and the milk bottle tops and whatever gadgets you use, they're not really in the real world. So when a child gets access to real money, they don't really have this sort of real life skills that perhaps they should. That's all we're trying to do. And it's not one size fits all. It's there to use if you want it to.
You're listening to The Voice of Russia in London with me, Juliet Spare, where we're talking about the digitalisation of pocket money. Joining me in the studio to discuss whether youngsters in the UK should have access to plastic money as young as 8 years old is the Chief Executive of Pocket Money, PKTMNY, no vowels, Mark Timbrell, Becky Goddard-Hill, a writer and mother of 2 children, Professor Agnes Nairn, a researcher and consultant on ethics and children, and Stephen Hopwood, a lawyer at Stowe Family Law firm and a father. I suppose we then can return to the wider issue of child spending and cash and consumerism and the brands. And is there no way then, though, that companies that accept your particular card and cash points that accept the withdrawal of cash on this particular card, that they will not be able to take some sort of data and predict purchases and spending trends on children?
Absolutely not. Not a chance.
That's very, very reassuring.
In the same way that, for example, an organisation like Visa doesn't really know what people are buying and when. It's all anonymous data. So there is, my children are the customers, hopefully, well, they are actually customers of Pocket Money, and my friends' children will be Pocket Money customers, I hope. And there's no way that I would want any of my children's data available to anybody to send them random messages. In fact, just allowing a child to have a smartphone or a Facebook account,
absolutely,
or to go on Twitter or to do any of the other things is outside of parental control. Everything we do is under parental control, and it's highly secured. So it's absolutely safe with regard to data.
Obviously, children are going to access technology. They need to access technology. It's their future, isn't it? In a lot of ways. But we do need to control it and make it as easily accessible and safely accessible as possible. There's a new Harry Potter book came out on PS3 a few weeks ago, and that was all about encouraging kids to read through a PlayStation. I was very sceptical to start with, but it's the same thing really. It's understanding technology is their way forward and trying to get good basic maths and reading skills in through that technology.
Stephen, just to come to you, we are sort of nearing the end of our discussion. I wondered, will companies have who sort of target children online in terms of the online shops, will they have to become safer in the future? Are there any more regulations that need to be taken on board by companies?
Not in terms of direct regulations, no. I mean, it's something that government is traditionally wary of interfering with. But I do think it comes down to, as what a lot of people have said, it comes down to parental controls. I mean, look at the 8-year-old who's allowed access to Facebook. As far as I can recall, you can't access Facebook unless an adult sets that account up for you. So there has to be. So I think my message would be that it has to come down to parental control, all of these things, and monitor what your child is doing in that in that environment, and don't be afraid or embarrassed to do so.
I think it's an interesting idea. I think it's a really good idea in terms of trying to get children to manage their money. What I would hope would be that you wouldn't end up taking advertising on your website and it will turn into a massive commercial machine. I think that would be very sad.
I think the only point I'd like to echo is Stephen's point, which is it is all under parental control. The child doesn't open an account directly. There's no direct communication. Everything is under parental control to create a safe and secure environment to learn about money.
I'd like to thank all my guests, the Chief Executive of Pocket Money, Mark Timbrell, Becky Goddard, a financial blogger and mother of 2, Professor Agnes Nairn, the researcher and writer and consultant on ethics and children, and Stephen Hopwood, lawyer and father at the Stowe Family Law Firm.